Hello, my name's Father Jonathan, if you've not met me before, and I'm the vicar at St Gabriel's Church, which you can see from school. It's got a huge tower and it's on Heaton Road. I think most of you have met me before because I come into school every Monday for lunch duty, but if you haven't, that's who I am. And I've been asked to give an assembly for Easter, which is one of the great celebrations of the Christian year. And I'm doing so from the church, a place where all people are welcome. I've been thinking a lot about the world, and I have a depiction of it here. Here it is, this beautiful planet that we live in and on. I wonder where you've been to in the world, or where you'd like to go. I wonder what would excite you about that, about lands to visit, or visits that you have made. I've been to see my sister in Australia, on the other side of the world, a completely different place from this country. Other worlds are very exciting to discover. They're places of adventure, of novelty, of newness. Behind me is the font for this church. This is a place where people are baptised or christened. Some of you may have been christened here yourself. And when it's used for a christening, it's full of water. In the old days, hundreds of years ago, people were baptised not in a font, but in a river. And they would go right under the water. And when I've explored that idea of baptism with young people like yourselves, I've asked the question, what's it like to be underwater? And one of the replies I got was, it's like being in another world. I love that. Another world, another part of the planet, another place. But there's a world that people of faith believe in, which is called heaven. It's a place that none of us have yet been to, another world that we can only imagine. But Jesus, who Christians follow, talked a lot about heaven. He talked about it as his kingdom. And it was a kingdom completely different from how this world operates, where the least important people were the most important. It's the kind of place where those who are neglected were cared for. It's a place where those who have least importance in this world became most significant. It was all upside down, different from how we see things. Now, I'm not sure what people made of his teaching, of his description of this place. After all, they'd never been there. How were they to know that he was talking the truth? But just before Easter, on Good Friday, as some of you will know, Jesus was executed. He was killed. He was got rid of. He'd become too provocative, too difficult a person to have around. He said uncomfortable things, so people got rid of him. That still happens today in our world, sadly. People sometimes are taken out, got rid of, murdered. And that seemed to be the end of this Jesus. But 3 days later, he was raised from the dead. He came back to life. And he'd been to that place, to heaven. He'd been to that territory that no one had ever been to before. And suddenly, his words about this kingdom of heaven had new meaning, because he'd been there. He had an idea, he had an experience of this other world beyond this world. And what he asked his followers to do was not just to think about heaven as a destination after this world, after we die, but to think about how we make heaven now, how we take his values and make them part of our life for the present moment. That we actually have the possibility as human beings of creating something of heaven on earth. We of course also have the opposite choice, which is to turn our backs on those values, and to make something different from heaven. And unfortunately, we're seeing the consequences of that in Ukraine. Every one of us, each day, has many, many choices that we can make. that can bring heaven closer or push heaven further away. Sometimes it can be as simple as something like smiling at someone or saying thank you, or being kind or thoughtful, or showing someone that you love them, that they matter to you. And sometimes that's most important for people who feel lost or frightened or scared, like those people who are fleeing from Ukraine. We can give them a little bit of heaven by showing that we care. So, as Christians approach Easter, the reminder that there is a world beyond this world called heaven, I invite you to think about what you could do each day to just bring a little bit of heaven to this world, to your place, your home, to your school, to this community. Perhaps you could be quiet for a moment and just think about that. And while you're quiet, I'm going to say a prayer. Loving God, thank you for the promise of heaven. Help us through your grace to bring heaven to earth each and every day. Amen. Thank you for listening, and whatever your faith or background, I hope you have a very happy Easter, and I look forward to seeing you back in school in the new term.